on Basic Marketing Research 201, and the whole objective of tonight is to help you, give you guys sufficient information so that you are able to complete the assignment and to submit it. There will be another online tutorial which will be closer to the exam time, and then we will really discuss within each chapter all the critical elements that you need to know and need to understand for the exam. But tonight it's really our main focus is the online tutorial. So let's start. Just the agenda. There's going to be a little bit of an introduction. Then we're going to spend time on chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We'll talk quickly about chapters 6 to 8. And then lastly, some additional information that you guys need to know to ensure that you submit your assignment correctly. Okay. So with regards to the introduction, as you guys all know, the 14th of not May, but March, that is a typo on my side, the 14th of March is the deadline for your assignment at 3 o'clock. Please note it's not 14th of May, it's 14th of March. There are 6 questions that you guys need to complete for the assignment. The sources that you're going to use is obviously your textbook. I hope all of you have the textbook. It's Marketing Research, the 3rd edition. It's quite a nice book. It explains quite nicely all the concepts, methodology, definitions. Then the second tool that you guys need is your learner guide for basic marketing research. Then obviously, as with everything else, you might want to do some additional reading or some internet searches to help you to answer the questions. But also very important as part of the assignment is the case study that's provided. Really, if I can give you advice, really familiarize yourselves with the case study, with all the information in it. Keep it right next to you when you answer the questions, because really the case study is applicable for question 1 to 5. It's only question 6 where you don't need the case study. So with questions 1 to 5, all your answers, please, you need to refer back to the case study, how you will apply it if that case study is applicable. So just keep that in mind. And remember, note of caution, a little bit of an error on my side. The deadline for the submission of your assignment is the 14th of March, not May. I repeat, the 14th of March, it's not 14th of May. Okay, so let's start. Chapter 1, Perspectives on Marketing Research. What do we mean by that? Out in our world, there's lots of information out there. And I'm sure most of you have heard the saying that knowledge is power. What do we need or mean by knowledge is power? It basically means that out there, there's lots of data. And if you apply the data, you will get to information. And if you apply the information, you will ultimately get to knowledge. Now, these three are all very important. Why? Because the environment is constantly changing, and it changes at a rapid rate. And it's not only changing for the organizations, but all those changes also has an impact on consumers, because consumers are constantly exposed to these changes. And these changes influences consumers' behavior, it influences their lifestyle, and it also influences their needs and wants. So what it in essence means is that consumers are changing all the time. And marketing information is information about the consumers. And it's crucial for any organization to have marketing information, because marketing information will enable them to develop, and or enhance the products and services that they offer to their customers. It will also help them with developing or fine-tuning or changing or enhancing these strategies. And yes, it means that they will keep in pace with the changing environment. What's changing out there, how it impacts on their customers, potential consumers, and they can adapt accordingly. I've just noticed that the camera angle is at an awkward level and that basically you just see my eyes. So just give me one sec. Let me just adjust it a bit and then we'll carry on. I hope that's a bit better. I know it's not the most gorgeous face on earth, but at least it's easier to follow the conversation if you see the mouth and not only the nose and eyes. Okay, so yes, marketing information means actually it is a crucial element for any organization to survive these days. So, and marketing research is a tool in obtaining marketing information. What do we mean by marketing research? In the world out there, you have on the one side, you have customers and consumers, people that are using your product, people that might be using your product in the near future, people that maybe don't know about your product yet but are perfect for your product. And totally on the opposite side, you have a business. And that business needs to know and understand the customer and the consumer. And that customer and consumer also needs to get hold of the business to tell them what is it that they want. And market research is in between these two. And market research facilitates the whole relationship between a business and a customer in the sense that it will provide customers the opportunity to tell a business what it is that they want, what it is that they need, what they like, what they don't like, what they expect. But also it will provide information to the business, to marketing, about their customers, what their customers want, need, expect, etc. So in essence, again, research is the link between the business and the customer. And I always used to say to my organization that I, as a market research manager, in essence, is your voice of the customer. I'm the voice of the customer in your business. If you want to know what it is that your customers want, come and speak to me. I will help you to make the right decisions, to plan the correct direction, to make changes based on the feedback and the knowledge from our customers. So that's what market research is. And you can see that market research plays an extremely important role within the concept of marketing information. So, and market research can be used in various contexts. It can help you to understand social cultural changes. For instance, in South Africa, and I think in a lot of other countries, we see a socio trend of urbanization. People are moving from rural areas into cities and big towns because they believe there are better opportunities for them that will ultimately provide them a better quality lifestyle. But as more people move in to the cities, there's lots of changes. There's changes in terms of demand, there's changes in terms of their consumption patterns, there's changes in terms of sales, etc. So market research can help you to understand that dynamic. The next is technological changes. Technology changes all the time, and it impacts every single one of us. And we react in a certain way. For instance, a few years ago, people were extremely concerned about doing banking via the internet. These days, it's part of the whole banking environment. It plays a crucial element because it's 24/7. It is speedy, it's cheaper, People can do their banking anytime, any place, 24 hours, 7 days a week. So te- technological changes has an impact on how our consumers behave. And market research can help a company to understand those changes. Also, increase consumer pressure. Consumers, as they get exposed to more and more information, becomes more and more clever, and they have a better understanding of their demands. What can they ask? What can they expect? Etc. And therefore, they will put a lot more pressure on businesses. And here, research can also help you understand what kind of pressure can you start expecting from consumers. How are they changing in terms of their increased levels of knowledge and the impact that that has on their behavior? Then there's competitors. They do stuff. Most companies don't operate in isolation. There are people, there are other organizations that offer the same products and services, and whatever they do has an impact on the consumer. Life cycle products, and then obviously developing new markets. So all these changes out there in the external environment. Um, Market research is an enabler. It helps a business to understand these changes and the impact it has on their markets. Now, there are three key roles that market research can perform. The first one is aimed on the current situation and what happened in the past. So it's about the history, the past, and current. And it will provide an organization with information about what happened in the past with consumers, with the industry, and the environment, and also what's happened currently. And that we call descriptive research. Then there's a next role that research can play, and that is in terms of cause and effect. So, what do I mean by cause and effect? A perfect example is when a company is planning to increase their prices. They need to understand the increase of that price. What will the impact of that be on the sales? Will they see a significant drop in sales? Will it stay the same? Will it drop initially and then go back to normal levels? Will it have no impact at all? So that's what we call cause and effect. The cause is a price increase, and the effect is what was going to happen with sales, and we call that diagnostic research. The last one is predictive research. That's about the future. Remember, we had the first one, descriptive, which is history and current, and then also what do they think is going to happen in future. The reality is, for any business to be successful, they cannot only concentrate on the now. They have to put plans in place to predict, or at least try and understand what's going to happen in future, because otherwise they're going to get caught with their pants on their knees. And if something goes wrong, and they're only in the now, it might be too late to fix it. The implications might be so severe that they will not be able to fix it. And that's what we call predictive. So a perfect example of predictive is also to say, currently, say for instance, my market is the seniors, people that are retired. And typically, currently, people are retiring at the age of 65. But if you don't look at the trend of retirement and you start predicting what's going to happen in future, you might miss out on the fact that maybe in 5 or 10 years, people are not going to retire at 65. Maybe they only retire at 70. Or they retire earlier. So that's the sort of idea what I mean with predictive research. Okay. So let's just see again, look at marketing information versus marketing research. On the one side, we have the external environment. As I mentioned, you get social changes, political impact, legislation has a huge impact on business and consumer behavior, the impact of technology, consumers themselves, and competitors. And then there's on the other side the business, the organization, their products, their services, their strategies. They have to constantly evaluate whether their products, services, and strategies are still appropriate, whether they need to change them totally, whether they have to bring in new products, services, whether they just have to make small adjustments. And the link between the two is marketing information. Now, there are various levels. Most companies are at the bottom level. They just have market research. But some companies are at a higher level in the sense that they have marketing information systems or MIS. The marketing information system just means it's a, a repository of information. There's data, stats, all sorts of information in that system, and it's usually a software program, etc., where the information gets stored. And research findings is usually one of the elements that gets stored in the MIS system. Then there's a level 3, which is the Rolls Royce, which is your marketing decision support system, MDSS. And what that means is, again, you have your marketing information, your data, your statistics, your findings from market research, but the marketing decision support system is a lot more sophisticated in the sense that you can now apply statistical modeling on that data. You can maybe have scenarios and what if situations. You can do segmentation. So it's really a lot more enhanced than level 1 and 2. But market research feature very prominently into level 2 and level 3 as well. Okay, so that gives you an idea of the role of marketing information. What is marketing information? It tells you what market research is, the role of market research, how market research can play a role on certain changes out there in the market and can really help an organization with their decision making. So, if you understand these concepts, it's great. But you also need to understand, as I was talking, I used terms like data, information, knowledge. And there's a difference between the three concepts. They're not the same. Data is just a lot of statistics, facts, opinions, predictions, whatever. It's just there. Information is the data or the facts or the statistics or predictions or opinions or combination of it that you use that is relevant to a very specific problem or question. Let's try and find an example to show to you guys the difference between it. Let's say I have a lot of statistics about Volkswagen drivers. I have information about their gender, male, female, the age category, how much they earn, whether they work, whether they don't work, their income levels, whether they like to buy a car new, pre-owned, etc. That's lots. Their opinions. What do they like about Volkswagen? What do they think they're going to buy in future? That's a lot of data. But now I have a problem. I am going to launch a new Volkswagen model, and that's going to be aimed very specifically to the student market or the young adult that just started out working. Now I am going to look at data about students. What do students like? What do they think about Volkswagen? Do they like this car? Can they afford it? What other requirements, needs do they have? And similar for young adults that just started out working. So that is also a lot of stats, facts, opinions, predictions, but it's specific to that problem that car that I want to launch in a specific market. So that becomes information. But I've also used another term which is called knowledge. So what's the difference between data, information, and knowledge? Knowledge is really it's the information that you have, so it's data to a specific problem or question that you use, but you also apply your experience and either any other insights or knowledge that you have to assist this information and to evaluate a current situation and other relevant situations. So, to come back to our example of the Volkswagen new model that we want to launch, I have a lot of experience in the car industry. I understand the market of Volkswagen, and I also know that the student market very specifically also like another model, and there are very specific reasons why. So now I also apply those insights and experience to the information that I have and to assess the whole situation. So I hope that sort of explains to you guys really the difference between data, information, and knowledge. Okay. There are more definitions, and definitions are actually very, very important. And especially towards the end of the semester, when you start preparing for your exams, make sure that you get that you understand the definitions. But one of the definitions that we really have to understand is the difference between deduction and induction. Deduction aims to test an existing theory, where induction aims to generate new theories. So, and I think the best is to try and find an practical example. So, for instance, I'm doing research on service quality, and my service quality measurement is very bad. So I have a theory that the reason why I get such a bad service quality rating is the fact that we had serious internet problems over the last 3 or 4 months, and I have a theory that that had an impact on my service quality measurement and rating. So deduction aims to test that theory. So I work from very general to something more specific. I'm now going to test, was the fact that my internet connection was down so often the reason for receiving low service quality rating? Induction is the opposite. It's you work from something very specific to general. So it is actually where I set a very specific observation that my internet was down a lot, and that is something very specific. I believe that that had an impact on service quality. The time was slow. People couldn't log in. So now I am generating lots of theories. They couldn't log in, so they just go to a competitor's website. My website hanged, so they couldn't get the information. So I'm generate theories of what the implications were of internet. So it's something very specific, and now I generate more general stuff. So at the bottom, I just described a little bit more, where deduction is you look for reasons, where induction is you look what did it mean. Deduction means it's very outcome orientated, so it's very specific. You ask very specific questions, where induction is very open-ended. So it's more a discussion that you talk about. And the type of analysis also differs. Deduction is very numerical because you test a hypothesis. So you will prove your hypothesis with statistics, 80% versus 20%, where induction is you generate new theories, so it's narratives, it's language, it's words that you use to describe the new theories. Okay, so brings us sort of at the end of chapter 1, the main things that you need to know in chapter 1, introduction into market research. And if you work through my slides again, you will be able to answer question 1, you will be able to answer question 2.1, and you will be able to answer question 2.2. Okay. So if you do your assignment and you get stuck with those questions, go back to these slides. It will take, Genevieve will upload them on the eLearn system, and she will upload them, give it about 3 days, and then they will be up on the system. Okay. Chapter 2 of our research textbook is research ethics. What do we mean with research ethics? Ethics is basically just a set of principles, rules, or norms that has an impact on 3 different parties in the research process. It has an impact on the participant. What do I mean by participant? The participant is the person that gonna participate in the research. So that's the person that we're gonna ask the questions, and they're gonna tell us how they feel. It has an impact on how the researcher behaves and needs to behave. The researcher is the person who commissioned the research project. They liaise with the research agency, etc. The sponsor, ethics also has an impact on the sponsor. What's the sponsor's rights? What can they expect? How do they need to behave? Now, who's the sponsor? Usually a research project starts with either a problem or opportunity or something somewhere in a business. And there will be a business manager or a marketing manager that has this problem, and they will contact the researcher and ask the researcher to do the research. Now, that manager that experienced the problem, that needs more information, or that have observed a potential opportunity, needs more information about that opportunity, that's the sponsor. Now, your ethics protect all these 3 parties, tells them how they should and shouldn't behave as well. So let's just recap again. Ethics is a set of principles, rules, or norms that ensure that there's correct behavior. And I think the correct behavior, it's balanced on 3 principles, 3 legs that support this correct behavior. The one is respect, the second one is welfare, and the third one is justice. What do we mean by these 3 concepts? Let's talk a bit about respect. Respect, it's really, first of all, you need to have respect for the people that participate in this research. They need to understand why are they participating. They need to have an option in whether they want to participate or not, because it's going to take time from them and they need to share information with it. So what it means is they have to give consent that they willingly participate. They need to understand what part they play in this research, how important it is. They need to understand that the information that they provide will be protected. It will be confidential. So it's respect for the participant. The second part is the welfare. And it's the welfare of the individual that participate in this research. It's the health of them, the happiness, the general well-being. And it means that we need to protect that individual that participates. So we need to minimize the risks. It means that we cannot share their personal information. And why do we emphasize the protection and the confidentiality of the individual that participate in research? Depending on the type of research, it can come back and harm a respondent. Let's say, for instance, you do research in an organization to understand the health of the employees, the happiness of employees in a little department. And there's only one person, me, that in that department that is a female that's over 50 years. Now, I gave feedback in the research, and there's certain things that I'm extremely unhappy about, and it's things that maybe my manager did. So I tell them in the research, I give them my honest opinion and feelings, etc. And I didn't rate my manager that well. Now they get the research manager analyze the data, and they present the findings to the manager. And they will tell the manager that um, he, these people were extremely unhappy with your behavior, and it is females that are older than 50. I mean, that department manager will know immediately that it was me who said it, because I'm the only one in their department. And it can come back and it can ruin my career. He can hold it against me forever. So you can see how important it is to protect information of a respondent. Then justice. And justice really means that everyone should be treated equally and fairly in this whole process. So one participant cannot derive more benefit than the other participant. So let's say we pay people to participate in the research. We do personal interviews, and some of the participants we pay and others we don't, but it's the same survey. That's not necessarily fair. So we have to make sure that everyone is treated the same in the research. Okay, so that's just try and explain in a nutshell the three principles of correct behavior: respect, welfare, and justice. Okay. Now, if someone participates in research, it is important that all these things are explained to him. But you, as a research manager, will not have direct contact with the participants. So, how do you control this whole process? How do you make sure that the participants in the project does it out of their own free will, that they give consent? The only way, and that is mainly it hinges on the respect principle. The only way that you can control this is by developing a consent form. And in that consent form, you need to explain certain things. You need to explain why is the research taking place? What is the purpose of the research? What is expected from the participant? Um, the fact that maybe there will be a video recording, they need to answer certain questions, but that it's voluntarily, no one can force them to participate. That at any stage, if they feel uncomfortable during the interview, they can end the interview and exit. You need to explain to them the benefits of the research. How will the findings be used? How will you implement the findings of the research? How will you obtain the information? It's either going to be a discussion around a table. You're going to ask them a number of questions. It's going to take about 10 minutes of their time, or you're going to give them a questionnaire that they have to complete, and you're going to collect it at a later stage. So you have to tell them exactly how you're going to get the information out of them. Then you have to ensure that whatever they tell you is in confidence. All the information will be held in confidence. If there are any risks, potential risks, you need to explain that to them. you need to explain to them how will the data be analyzed. My example that no one will be able to identify a specific person, that we will analyze it in broad categories. It will be lumped, their response will be lumped together with other respondents' responses, and we will look at it holistically. It will be stored on the company's mainframe, but no personal details will be linked to it. Then, if they have any concerns about this research, who do they need to contact? So you need to give them you as the manager or another researcher's contact details, and how will you try and minimize risk? Now, the participant must sign this consent form. That's the only way that you, as the market research manager who controls this whole process, can ensure that everything was explained to the participant and that he is in agreement. So whatever consent form there is, they must sign. And you have to keep in mind that the participant can always refuse to participate. Okay, so let's look. And this is not the ultimate. This is to give you a guideline of what the researcher can sign at the end. So it's not perfect. It's just a rough guideline. And you will see at the top, it's a consent form. There's a little blocking, that's the name of the project. Then the name of the sponsor. If you want to reveal who the sponsor is, let's say it's Volkswagen, or you can say a major car manufacturer. And then it's, I agree to participate in the research project led by, and this is usually the research company's name. And the purpose of the document is to specify the terms of the participation. It will, and here the participant have to sign that they received sufficient information about the research. They understand what the purpose of their participation as an interviewee is. It was explained to them. They understand that it's voluntary and that they can exit whenever they want to. The participation, what does it mean? It means that they will be interviewed by someone from a certain company. It will tell them how long the interview will last. It will tell them if there was maybe written notes taken, or if there's maybe a video recording, or you take photos, or whatever. And that they in agreement with that they don't mind that you take a photo, or that it's video recorded or audio recorded, and again that they can at any time withdraw, that they have to right not to answer any of the specific questions, so they can participate, but if there are one or two questions that they're not comfortable with, they don't have to answer that. They receive the guarantee that you will not identify them by name or function. And then who can they contact if they have any problems, that they've read and understand all the points on the form, and that they sign it, and that the interviewer will also sign. This is just an idea. Now, in your assignment, you are required to develop a consent form. And what you need to understand, and remember what I said in the beginning, questions 1 to 5, whenever you answer these questions in your assignment, you have to refer back to the case study. So if you use this consent form and you cut and paste it into your assignment, you haven't answered the question 100%, because you're not referring back to the case study. You have to work in the dynamics of the case study into a consent form. So, just warning, you cannot just cut and paste this consent form. You will lose marks for it. It gives you an indication of certain things that the participant need to sign off that they're in agreement with. Okay. So, this brings us at the end of chapter 2. And with now, you guys will be able to answer question 3.1 of the assignment and 3.2. The next chapter, and I see that with me forwarding the presentation to someone else, it threw out all the alignments. I will make sure that the alignment is correct before they post it online. But the next chapter is about the overview of the marketing research process. There's a whole process. So let's just think, how do you start with research? Where does it all start? A marketing research process always starts with the need for information. And it's either the need for information to address a problem, to rectify the problem, to implement actions to change something, or an opportunity. You need to understand the dynamics of the opportunity. You think it's a potential opportunity, but you need to actually see whether it is a real opportunity. You need more information before you can design a new product or develop a new strategy or develop a new campaign. So it always starts with the need for information for either a problem or opportunity. Now, the marketing research process can be split into two phases. The phase, and it doesn't matter whether it is a problem or opportunity. Both these phases apply to whether it is a problem or opportunity. Phase one, we call preliminary research, and this is really where you try and understand whether there is a need for research, what type of research should you do, will it be feasible, is there already information available? But don't worry, on the next slide we will really unpack this phase. And then followed from phase one, there's a second phase, which we call the formal research. The phase one is all the upfront work before you actually decide whether you're going to do formal research or not. Phase two of the whole research process is actually now where you start and design and implement your formal research process. Okay, so let's unpack it. The research process consists out of 11 steps. Phase one is step 1 to 4. Step 1 is really, remember I said research always starts with a problem or opportunity. So really understanding what is this problem, what is the opportunity, why do you need research. Step 2 is then developing research objectives. So what information or questions do you need to answer this research? And I will discuss in slides further down the line the problem and the research objectives in a little bit more detail. Then the research design is step 3. What type of information do you require? Step 4 is then secondary research. So that means that you will really go and look at what information is already available, either within your company, maybe previous research that you've done already that applies to this problem or opportunity, case studies that's available externally, maybe information that's available on external databases or web searches, etc., that can help you understand what information is already available. Now, at the end of step 4, you will evaluate all that information that's available and you will say, okay, if I look at the information that's available, do I still need to do research? Is it sufficient? And I don't have to do stage 2, phase 2 formal research, or no, it's not nearly efficient. We cannot answer the research problem, so yes, I have to do it. So you have to ask them the question, is there more need for information at the end of step 4? Yes, no. And depending on if it's yes, then you will proceed with phase 2, which is your formal research. Now, step 5 in the formal research is really the method. Here you decide on how you're going to collect the information, and we will talk about the method of data collection. Then once you've designed your method of data collection, Depending on the method, you will have to design a questionnaire or discussion guide. Then step 7 is the sample plan. So it is who are going to be the participants in your research, how many are you going to include in your research, if it's a quantitative research, how big is your sample, what sample methodology are you going to use. Then step 8 is your fieldwork. This is actually where you take your questionnaire, you go to the participants, and you conduct an interview, or you sit around a table, you use your discussion guide, and you have a discussion, and you talk about the topic. Then step 9, after you've done your fieldwork, you will have lots of information, data. You need to prepare that data and process it. It has to be captured. You have to make sure that all the questions are answered, that they're correctly answered, etc. And then step 10, after you captured that data, you need to analyze it. This is where you do statistical analysis, and in complex surveys you will do modeling. And then lastly, you will interpret this analysis, and you will prepare a presentation and or a report depending on the needs. So really, if you understand the research process, you will now be able to answer question 4. But I said we will spend a little bit more time on the problem definition and research objectives. So, and as I explained to you, it always starts with either problem and or opportunity. And it starts within the marketing or the business environment. So it starts with the business problem. You as a researcher you have to take that business problem, and you have to develop, based on the business problem, you have to develop a research problem. Now, what the hell is the difference between the two? A business problem is action-orientated, and a research problem is information-orientated. What does it mean? I mean, this is probably just words to you. A business has a problem, or I think there's an advantage or opportunity. They need to implement some actions to either rectify the problem or take advantage of the opportunity. That is the business problem. But that is not your research problem. Your research problem is information orientated. So, what kind of information are you going to give that business or marketing manager to help solve the business problem, or to take advantage of the opportunity, to understand the opportunity and to implement actions to take advantage? So the research will provide information. The business problem is how are you going to take action. That's the difference between the two. Now you first have to develop a business problem. So you will probably sit with that business manager and that marketing manager and really discuss this problem, and you will get into an in-depth understanding of what it is, what kind of information they're looking for, what information do they already have. And from there, you will develop a research problem. The research problem will be your guidance, your reference that you need to use to develop research objectives. And what is a research objective? An objective is really, it just tells you, what do you hope to achieve with this research? What do you want to get out of this research? And there are two types of objectives that you have to develop, always. When you develop research objectives, there are always two types of these. First, your primary objective. Then second, there are secondary objectives. And you will see these 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Doesn't mean they have to be 4, but there's more than one. So let's look at the differences. A primary objective, That's your main objective of what you want to achieve. And please note, a primary objective is only one objective. There is not 2 or 3 primary objectives. When you develop the primary objective, there is only one. And you have to cover in that objective what will be studied. So what do you try and achieve? Where will it be? In South Africa, in Gauteng only, where? And then the reason, the purpose of what do you want to study. So those 3 elements are crucial when you develop your primary objective, which is the overall objective. And to really make sure that you cover everything in your primary objective, you look at your research problem. Because everything that's in your research problem will help you to understand what will be studied, where will it be studied, and what will the purpose of it be. Then there's the secondary objectives. And remember here I'm talking about, and you will see I've highlighted the S. It is objectives. You will always have multiple objectives. You will never ever have only one secondary objective. And the difference between the two is your primary objective is the main reason why you're doing research. Secondary objectives are all the topics that you want to include in the research. So let's say your business problem is that you've noticed that there's a decrease in market share. So your research, your business problem will be that it's a decrease in market share, and you need to take actions to stop the decrease in market share, stabilize it, and ultimately increase it again. Your research problem is what information are you going to give the business manager to ultimately implement corrective actions to stop the decrease. So your main objective is really to understand what caused the decrease in market share amongst customers that have a check account, and to ultimately enable the business to implement actions to stop the decrease in market share decrease. That's your main objective. Now your secondary objectives, what are the specific things you will look at? Maybe are they satisfied with the product that they use? Are there any aspects of maybe any needs that they have that the product doesn't meet? Maybe the product is too expensive, so you will test pricing. You will test the support service after they bought the product. You will maybe check the availability of the product. So you see, it's more than one topic that you will cover in your research to ultimately understand the reasons for the decline in market share. Now, there are a few guidelines when you develop secondary objectives. You always number your objectives. And if you remember correctly, the previous slide, I've numbered them objective 1, objective 2, objective 3, objective 4. There is no ultimate number of secondary objectives. It depends on every research project individually, but it must be at least more than one. You need at least 2 or 3 secondary objectives. Now, your secondary objectives needs to be very clear and specific, and they always start with the action-orientated word. Words like determine, examine, find out, establish, measure, explore, investigate. You always start your secondary objectives with those type of action-orientated words. So if you really understand the concept of objectives. What a primary objective is, a secondary objective is, and how to develop them, and you understand the business problem and where the objectives fit in, you will be able to answer question 5.1 and 5.2 in your assignment. Chapter 5, your research design and proposal. Now, if we look at a research design just means it's the outline, a framework or plan for the whole research project. And there are various steps in it. It's you define the research problem, which we've discussed. You estimate the value of the information provided by the research. That is part of your preliminary phase of the research process, where you look at whether there's information available already, whether it's still necessary to do the research. Then the second step is you select the data collection method. Then you'd select the measurement technique. Thereafter, you select the sample. You select the analytical process, how you're going to analyze the data. You evaluate the ethics of the research. You specify how long the research is going to take, what the cost is, and then you prepare a research proposal. Now, in the research design chapter, we are going to focus on the 3 highlighted blocks: the data collection method and measurement technique, and the research proposal. So the methodology, the data collection methodology technique. There are 2 ways of doing it: qualitative research and quantitative research. And there is a significant difference between the 2 methods. Now, in research, your methodology can be either one of these, or it can be a combination. And you will see at the bottom, what I found is that these 2 terms are very close to each other, qualitative, quantitative. And people get confused about it, and they use qualitative, but they actually meant quantitative or the opposite. So how to remember the difference between the 2? Qualitative has the word L in it, and it means, the L stands for language. Quantitative has the letter N in it, and it stands for numbers, starting with the N, numbers. So, what is the difference between the 2? Qualitative is when you do research and you want to understand feelings and emotions. So there are no statistical analysis. So that's why I said it's L for language. It's usually very small samples, so that's why you cannot do the numbers crunching. You cannot do statistical analysis. You need very skilled interviewers or facilitators. And your reporting, you don't use graphs, statistical models, etc. for your reporting. You'll use words, sentences, to describe trends, etc. So it's all about language. Qualitative L equals language starting with L. Then quantitative that's where you do the numbers games. It's all about statistics. You do large samples, never anything less than 100. Your interviewers don't have to be so skilled because it's a very structured methodology. There is a structured questionnaire that the interviewer has to follow. They don't facilitate conversation. They ask question 1, then question 2. And your reporting is all about numbers, graphs, statistical modeling. That's why quantitative N equals numbers. And that's the 2 methodologies that you can use in your research design. Now, you can use either one of them or you can use both. And it's very important that you understand the differences between these two. And it's just, again, these two methodologies, they're different ways of doing it. When you do qualitative, it's a focus group. It's where people sit around a table and you talk about various topics. Also in-depth conversation, so it's a one-on-one, but it's not a structured questionnaire. You talk about topics. So there's just a discussion guideline. Or there's projective techniques where you do, which gives maybe wordplay. I say to you, if I tell you the word money, what are all the thoughts that coming up in your head? Let's talk about that. So it's projective techniques. Where quantitative is structured, it's about surveys, experiments, observations. And your surveys is the different formats. You can either send a questionnaire via the mail, you can do a survey over a telephone, you can do surveys via SMS, you can do web-based surveys, or you can have a personal interview where they do the survey. And this is just again to show you the differences between qualitative and quantitative. The purpose first for qualitative is to understand and interpret, where quantitative is you test something, you test a hypothesis, a finding, a cause and effect. Remember in the beginning when we talked about predictions, descriptive cause and effect, that's where you use quantitative. The research objectives are very different. Where with qualitative, you will explore, you will discover, you will try and understand. Where with quantitative, you will explain, you will measure, you will predict, you will describe. The samples are also different. With qualitative, it's small, it's non-representative, where quantitative is the large, randomly selected representative samples. Data collection, qualitative is very unstructured, so you don't have a formal questionnaire. It's a flow of conversation. And as I said in the previous slide, it's focus groups, etc., where your quantitative is very structured. It's about numbers and statistics. So you will really follow a questionnaire, and it's question 1, and then you ask question 2, and you will not deviate from that. And because of that, the method of data collection, the data analysis is different. And the outcome ultimately is also different. And the final report is then different because qualitative, you use words, you use stories, you use direct quotations. It's all about the narrative. Where in quantitative, it's all about the statistics, the numbers. So that's very important to understand the difference between the methodologies and how you collect the data differently. Then the research proposal. The research proposal is at the end of your research design, but it is an extremely important document because it's a planning document. This is how you plan to do your research. It's also a reference document. If anyone comes in new into the project or someone leaves a company and someone else has to take over, that's your reference. If during the research process there are queries, you will go back to your research proposal because it's your reference document. If you want to duplicate the research at a later stage, that's your reference document. So your research proposal is extremely important. And it's always a written document, always, always. And it will state what research will you do, when the research will be done, and how you will do it. The research proposal can also be internally in an organization, be a sales document. There will be a decision maker who will either approve or decline, reject the research project. And they will work through the research proposal and base their decision on the content of the research proposal. Therefore, it must be able to convince the decision maker that it's unique. This is very specific reason why you do this research. The information is nowhere else available and there is really a need for it. It will definitely have some advantages for the organization. The organization will benefit if they do this research. Then, what will be the economical value of the research? What value will the organization get out of it? And then the economical justification. So the cost. Can the organization afford it? So this, you can see that your research document proposal is not just because someone thought, it would be great to compile a written document. It is a very, very important document for making decisions and then ensure that the right research is conducted, and also in terms in planning accordingly, and then in future to refer back to the content of the research. So a research proposal, what is the content of a research proposal? If you search on the web and you search for templates, you will get various templates. They all differ, but there are core elements that are critical and that is similar. That doesn't matter what template you use. So the content is always, your proposal will always have a title page. What is the project name, the title? Then secondly, what is the purpose of the research? The problem statement. Why are you doing the research? Then it will cover the research design. Remember we talked about the research types in the beginning. Will it be exploratory, descriptive, or causal? Then it must cover the sample. What sample it is, how big the sample is, who's included, who's excluded, how will you draw the sample, your data collection method, will it be qualitative, quantitative, or combination? Then the personnel requirements, people that are working on the project. How many people will work on the project? Who will be responsible for what? What level of expertise do you require from them? What are their roles? How many hours are they going to work? What's the cost involved of the number of people that work on this project? Then the cost estimate, how much will it cost? How long will it take? And then how are you going to do the analysis? What's the plan? How are you going to analyze the data? These 9 aspects are usually pretty standard. Doesn't matter what template you use, you will find that these 9 elements are always covered in a research proposal. Okay. So at the end of this chapter, you guys will now be able to answer question 2.3 as well as question 6. Okay. We still have 3 more chapters in this handbook of us, marketing research. The collection of secondary data, then primary data, where we will discuss in detail qualitative techniques and quantitative techniques. It is not required to have an in-depth understanding of how you go about secondary data, the different techniques in qualitative research and the different techniques in quantitative techniques to complete the assignment. It is a very important element for the exam. Therefore, tonight I'm not going to cover these 3 chapters, but we will discuss them in detail in the exam, in our preparation for the exam, which is the later tutorial, online tutorial. Now, I'm not the examiner for basic marketing research. I don't know what the content of the exam will be, but based on my experience and based on previous exam papers, these 3 chapters will be very important. So I will encourage you guys to diarize the date of the next online webinar and try and attend it, or then at least go on to eLearn and listen to that online tutorial. Okay. But there's the assignment, and I just want to touch base on very specific guidelines that you need to follow for the assignment. Because otherwise you guys are going to lose unnecessary marks. And it's just It's heartbreaking to see how much effort people put into their assignment, and then we mark negatively on the format, the layout, referencing, in-text citation, and you didn't follow the right formats, and you lose unnecessary marks. And it can sometimes mean the difference between a distinction or the difference between a pass and a not pass. So let's just spend a little bit of time on this. The format of your assignment. Your assignment must be typed, not handwritten, on a plain A4, maximum 2,500 words, excluding your reference list, which will be at the end of your assignment. Now, the 2,500 words is the ideal, and you have to keep in mind if your assignment is longer than 2,500 words, whoever marks your assignment has the right to stop marking at the end of 2,500 words. So try and stick to it. I don't know who's going to mark the assignments, but to be on the safe side, try and stick to it. Your font, use Arial 12 with a 1.5 line spacing, and make sure that your alignment is justified. What do we mean by justified? It means that your text is evenly distributed between your left and your right hand margin. So the left and the right hand margin will form lines. Make sure that your questions are numbered and that the question heading is numbered, that it's highlighted, maybe use a bold font, underline it, and use the same order as in the assignment. I've marked assignments where people jump from question 1 to 4 and then 2.3 and then 2.1. We mark negatively for it, so please keep them in the order as per assignment. And then on every page, make sure that there is a student, your name, your surname, your student number, the module number, and the page number. And remember, the page number, I just want to go back. The page number, I have it at the top as well. The way you need to number your page is page 1 out or off, however pages your assignment is. So if your assignment is in total 20 pages, then the first page is page 1 of 20, page 2 of 20, and the last page, page 20 of 20. So make sure that you follow the right format for the page numbering. In-text citation. Please, you need to include in-text citations for each citation. Remember, there must be a reference in the reference list, which is at the end of your assignment. And the format that we use is author date style. So it requires the name of the author and the year of the publication, not the publication title. And I've given you 2 examples. You can use either of them, of those examples for in-text citation. If it's a direct quote, paraphrase, or passage, then you also need to include the page number. Now, just see 2 different ways, if it's just 1 page versus a number of pages. And then also note sometimes your author, it's 2 authors. So then there are 2 ways of using the correct citation, and I've given you an example. Your referencing. Now, a reference list, there's a reference list and a bibliography. What's the difference between the 2? The first one, the reference list, contains all the books, articles, web pages that you refer to in the text of your document, your assignment. And your reference list is always at the end of the assignment. The same for bibliography. It's at the end of the assignment, but here you will include all other sources that you consulted in the completion of your assignment. Maybe you just wanted to read up on a topic like maybe want to get ideas on how to do a consent form. So you search for templates for consent form, you read up on ideas for a consent form. So those sources if you then include in your bibliography. Now, again, the sources must be in alphabetical order by author. So you use the author name to sort your sources in alphabetical order. But sometimes a source doesn't have an author. Then you use the first word of the title to order it in alphabetical order. And the same if there's more than one author, you use the first surname of the author to order it in alphabetical order. Then sometimes if you, for instance, use the textbook as reference and there is more than one item in the textbook, then you list the items in chronological order for the same author. Each item must be a new line. So make sure that it's a new line. But it's not a numbering, that you don't number the items, and there's no indentation. You start with each item immediately at the start of your page margin. And also don't categorize it. I find quite often that people will categorize first the textbooks, then all other publications, then all the online searches. No, you combine them all together in alphabetical order. So let's just look at some idea, but remember, all the detail about referencing is on eLearn. So go and study it. All I've done for tonight is just, if it's a textbook, what do you include? So you start with the author's surname, followed by a comma. Then the initials of the author in capital, followed by a full stop between each capital if there's more than one initial. So let's say you use me, it's Roo, my surname Roo, comma. C, capital C, full stop, J, full stop, and then a comma. Then the year of the publication, full stop. Then the title of the textbook, in italics, and then full stop. Then the edition of the textbook, but if it's a first edition, you don't have to put it in. But if it's a second or third or fifth edition, you put in the edition, and it's usually a number followed by ed and a full stop, like I've used in my example. Then the place of the publication, which is the town or city, followed by a colon, and then the publisher, followed by a full stop. So please go to your to eLearn and look at the guidelines. There are similar guidelines that you need to use for journal articles, newspaper articles, online searches. Please follow them. And remember, you do not categorize it textbooks, then articles, then online searches. You mix them. So I'm not too sure if there are any questions. Please, this is at the end of our tutorial for tonight. If you follow these guidelines, you will be able to answer all the questions in your assignment. If there are any questions, please type them. I'll give you guys a minute or so to type any questions if you have. Okay, it doesn't look as if there are any questions. So really, this is the end of our tutorial tonight. Good luck, all the best with your assignment. And remember, if you get stuck, go on to eLearn, check this tutorial. Everything you need to know to do your assignment was covered tonight in this tutorial. Otherwise, go back to your textbooks. Everything else is covered in your textbook detail, in your textbook, and your learner guide. All the best, guys. I hope you do very well in your assignments. Good night.